Three, two. Welcome into the Big City Sports Podcast. We have another episode coming at you, and it's March. And I think that everyone knows that there is madness that takes place in March, and we are definitely seeing it so far in this March Madness college basketball run that's been taking place. Slig, how's your bracket, and how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I appreciate you asking. Before I get into how terrible my bracket is, I just want to say how thankful and grateful I am to have March Madness back. Because last year when everything got shut down, the tournament being canceled was not only my least favorite thing that happened, but also when it really sank into me how different everything was going to be. And while obviously the tournament's a little different, being played all in Indiana this year, it's still been really, really entertaining to watch, and I'm thrilled to have it back.
Yeah, for sure. It's been so much fun. I didn't realize how much I missed it until I saw how many games are taking place. Ooh, this one's over. Let me hop here. Let me hop over there. Let me do this. And we're making so much food. You're shoveling it down. You're watching the games. It's amazing to just see how everything's taking place. And in our city that you were at, you went to the game against that Syracuse had their victory. I guess some would call it an upset. The last game that they played against West Virginia. How was that experience?
Oh man, that was awesome. I'm really glad that I was able to make that one work. I looked into going to the first game against San Diego State too, but tickets were a little bit more expensive than I wanted to spend. Considering it was the first round, I didn't want to break the bank just in case the unlikely event Syracuse keeps this up and gets really, really far. They played the game yesterday at the time of recording at Bankers Life Fieldhouse where the Pacers play. So a larger venue with more tickets, so the prices were a lot more reasonable. My buddy and I went down there. It was definitely a little different from the last time I went to a March Madness game in terms of atmosphere and capacity and everything, but it was still a really good time, man. Got there just after Loyola Chicago beat Illinois, so a lot of Loyola fans who made the trip provided downtown Indy with a lot of energy. And then Syracuse, of course, that's my team for anyone who doesn't know, pulled off the upset, beat West Virginia, made it back to the Sweet 16. Pretty good amount of Syracuse fans, I'd say, for the people who did make it to the game. So a lot of energy there. It was really cool, man. I definitely had a good time. I'm hoping they surprise me and keep the run going. I don't know if you think they can.
I think they can. I like this team. Like we talked off the air before we hopped on. They're taking on Houston, and that's going to be a big dog. They're good at rebounding, and that's one of Syracuse's weaknesses with the 2-3 zone. They don't necessarily have the size, so it's going to be tricky to see how they match up against them. But hey, if Buddy Boeheim continues the way he's been playing, they could have a shot.
Dude, I mean, he was just intoxicatingly good in the first game against San Diego State. And while he wasn't quite as absurd against West Virginia, he still had a really, really strong second half. Syracuse did enough to survive that game at the end, despite Dolezaj and Jesse Edwards being in foul trouble. So, it was definitely encouraging to see. Houston will be a tough one because even the West Virginia game, Syracuse got destroyed on the offensive glass, which is unfortunately a recurring theme, even in Syracuse's better games. They're a pretty undersized team overall. And imagine if Rutgers held on against Houston, because that would have left an 8 seed, 10 seed, 11 and 12 left in that corner of the bracket. But Houston, as good as they are, I mean, I don't think they're a perfect team. So if Syracuse is able to shoot the ball well, they can win. Otherwise, they won't. But I think that's pretty fair to say of any team. But if I'm hoping to get back down to Indy for the game, I'll keep an eye on it. But if they somehow manage to upset Houston and get into the Elite Eight, and Buddy Boeheim goes back to scoring 30 points, and I might need a cum rag in the stands, man. I mean, that's the fact they barely snuck into the tournament, and they've made a run as a double-digit seed for the third time in 6 years. So I'm kind of in a tough spot where, I want them to win a championship, but I'm also pleasantly surprised they got this far. So it's kind of difficult as a fan, but a good problem to have, I guess.
Yeah, it is a good problem. And it kind of reminds me how the Giants were this season. Obviously, they didn't get into the playoffs, but they exceeded the expectations of the fans. And let's transition over to the Giants with what they've been talking about, what they've been doing. Kenny Golladay was someone that they brought in after we recorded our long episode on free agency. And Golladay was the first big name wide receiver. Talk about him real quick.
Yeah, no, I got some thoughts on that one. I mean, first of all, I would argue the Giants only exceeded expectations because their division was historically terrible. But in fairness, I mean, we had the huge free agency episode last week, and I still thought we covered a great deal of it. But Holy shit, man. The Giants have been all over the place since we recorded that last Thursday. They've made arguably the two biggest signings in the league. Starting with Galladay. We have talked about him possibly being a Giants target on this show before. And yes, that is me patting myself on the back. I want to be stroked off on this episode. But yeah, the Giants have made it clear going into the offseason that playmaking was a huge need for them. They needed a true number one wide receiver. And Galladay, I thought, was the number one wide receiver available on the free agency market. And the Giants were really aggressive and active in terms of pursuing him. They gave him a big contract. Get into that in a minute. But he is the first true number one wide receiver Daniel Jones has had in New York. He's that X receiver on the outside who's a good vertical receiver, which fits with Daniel Jones, and he is a deep threat, can make contested catches. So I'm excited to have him in the offense, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it will. And he definitely chased the money. Let's be honest here. He looked at two teams. He looked at the Chicago Bears and the New York Giants. That's not too compelling for a normal wide receiver that wants to go to a nice situation. Like, the Giants were down a little bit. I mean, I guess they exceeded, but you know what I mean. Like, the Bears, they're not going anywhere. They had Andy Dalton as their quarterback. Daniel Jones is the Giants quarterback. So he saw a good opportunity to bring in some money, and it's actually a good fit for him. So he saw the fit regardless of the quarterback situation and the offense and any of that stuff. I think he can come in and make some nice catches there. But also, one more signing that took place was Adoree Jackson. Adoree Jackson, the corner on the outside, speedy guy, had a down year last season. What do you like about him?
Well, let me get into Jackson in a minute because I still want to talk about Galladay a little
All
bit
right.
more first, if you don't mind. I mean,
Do it.
it's big news, you know. Start with the contract really quick. I mean, he got a 4-year deal, $72 million, and yet why would you not take that if you're a player being offered big money, right? I'm not going to blame him for that, but yeah, you got 40 million guaranteed, and yeah, considering the free agent market this year, it's. Yeah, the Giants are one of the few teams that have been really aggressive with it. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. So, first of all, in terms of the salary cap space, I think it became clear pretty quickly in free agency across the league that some teams who didn't have a ton of space available, that was a little bit overblown because teams have been using this little loophole or accounting measure where they're just converting guaranteed money into signing bonuses, essentially, which frees up cap space immediately, but takes some away down the line. But that's where the Giants have gotten the money to bring in these guys. And we're seeing teams across the league do it because salary cap went down this year due to all the financial implications of everything happening, right? So that's kind of where that came from. And I think the approach with Galladay, Adoree Jackson, et cetera, is the NFL is having a new TV deal kick in here in a couple of years. And similar to what we saw in the NBA in, I think, the 2016 offseason, the salary cap exploded. And that should provide the Giants with the relief and every other team with the relief, or at least some, for pushing some of this money down the line. So I think that's where the Giants' aggressiveness and line of thought came in. But you're really quick on Galladay. I do like his fit in terms of the vertical and deep threat. He can make contested catches, should be a good red zone guy, and is somebody that Daniel Jones should be able to rely on. And they both thrive vertically. My biggest question is more just how Jason Garrett's going to use him, because I have not made it a secret that he is not my favorite in terms of play calling and philosophy. But yeah, if we want to switch over to defense, we can talk Adoree Jackson now if you want.
Yeah, one last thought on Galladay before we get to Jackson. I feel bad for Jared Goff. He's going to be throwing to ham sandwiches there because Marvin Jones is now in Jacksonville. Kenny Galladay's gone. Of course, Golden Tate left a few years ago. He's throwing to nobody. He is throwing to absolutely nobody there. I guess you got Marvin Hall as your number one. Amendola might still be there, but I feel bad for Jared Goff. But going to Adoree Jackson real quick.
For sure.
Yeah.
That move happened earlier today, Monday, as we're recording this episode. So one of the Giants' other clear needs outside of a true number one wide receiver was a cornerback too, across from James Bradberry. And I know we've talked about that on this show several times. And all of a sudden, Adoree Jackson became available when he became a salary cap casualty for the Titans. And he got a really big contract too, 3 years, $39 million. I think about 26 of it was guaranteed. The Titans didn't want to give him them 10. And the Giants, went all out to recruit him. Logan Ryan and Jabril Peppers got involved, and they got it done before he even visited the Eagles, who were scheduled to sit down with him too. So little pride in beating them to something. But Jackson makes sense as a cornerback too. He really does. Again, probably a bit of an overpay in this market, especially in year one. But once that TV deal kicks in, the salary cap implication should be reduced a bit down the line. So I get that line of thinking. And Jackson is, at least when he's healthy, a really, really athletic and speedy corner who thrives in man coverage. And Patrick Graham really likes to run man coverage, but didn't get the opportunity to too much with Isaac Yadam and Corey Ballantyne. And then Julian Love was a little better at the end of the year, but they had a rotating set of guys at that CB2 spot. It was a clear weakness across from Bradbury, and Adoree Jackson should definitely help shore that up.
Yeah, I have one question real quick on Adoree Jackson. Do you think the Giants will use him as a special teamer? Because he's definitely has the speed in the return game that he's done it before.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely look into that, especially with kick returns. The Giants got some pretty decent productivity from Jabril Peppers as a punt returner, but I also don't think it's a lock because you have to remember the Giants brought in John Ross too this offseason, and they could definitely look to use him on special teams. And he also signed a much smaller contract, so I mean, hopefully neither of these guys get injured. But if somebody gets injured on a kick return, you'd rather have it be a gadget wide receiver than a starting cornerback.
That's fair. I remember the Colts had that conundrum when T.Y. Hilton was potentially doing that. You don't want your star players getting hurt on special teams. But I'm a big Notre Dame fan, and I saw enough of Adoree Jackson to where I know that he's good, and he definitely made me upset. But speaking of Notre Dame, the Giants brought in Kyle Rudolph, former tight end at the university, played at with the Minnesota Vikings, and I think he's a nice veteran tight end to come in there.
Yeah, that one caught me off guard a little bit more. Of all the targets we mentioned for the Giants, we didn't really think about tight end too much. And I didn't. Rudolph is a really interesting comparison to Evan Ingram, who's still on the team. And I'll get into him in a second. But Rudolph signed a 2-year deal, but there's no guaranteed money in the second year. So if he doesn't play well year one, the Giants can get out of that without any salary cap problems. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. Rudolph has been a solid tight end for several years. I think he peaked as a receiver a couple of seasons ago, but he's been a reliable target with good hands. He's a good blocker his entire career. So he's kind of a high floor player, doesn't have a super high ceiling at this point, but the Giants ran a lot of multiple tight end sets, and he can definitely fit in as somebody who is more consistent and reliable than the, how do we put this? Inconsistent Evan Ingram.
Yeah, I remember your famous analogy on this show is Evan Ingram couldn't catch an STD from Charlie Sheen.
Man, one of my favorite jokes.
Yeah, but I like Rudolph's fit, honestly. I think as a tight end too, gives him that blocking element. I mean, he's an upgrade from, what was that guy's name? Was it Toivolo that was on the team?
Levine Toilolo, who is on the Giants, by the way.
Yeah, I think he's an upgrade there. Definitely helps. He's decent in the red zone as well. But I think this is a very similar move as the Bears did with Jimmy Graham a few years ago, last year.
Yeah, the only difference is Rudolph can block.
Yeah.
And the second year of the contract, the Giants can get out of with no real issues. So, but I do understand the comparison. Some aging wide tight ends who are probably more known for their receiving ability, who aren't quite what they were in their peak. But we also didn't give Rudolph a no trade clause. So, throw that in there.
Yeah, no trade.
Overall, I mean, right now the Giants have 4 tight ends on the roster. And bringing him in, along with Caden Smith, who I honestly think has been solid for the Giants in his spot appearances. Toilolo's around as a blocker, and he's fine, I guess. I'm not going to lie and say I was a huge fan. But, I mean, I think we've seen a couple of teams around the league use 4 tight ends or carry 4 tight ends on the season. But I'm really curious to see how this move impacts Evan Ingram, who has a lot of clear talent and athletic ability, but he is really, really inconsistent. And when he screws something up, it has a tendency to absolutely destroy the Giants' drive or ends up having a huge impact on the game. And I'm wondering if the Giants are going to look into offloading him due to his, let's say, very frustrating nature.
That could be a move. And one more thing real quick on the Giants. I found it interesting that they decided to go with Nate Solder and restructure his contract instead of release him outright. Did that catch you by surprise?
Only a little bit. There would have been a pretty good amount of dead salary cap hit if we were to cut him now. I'm very confident they'll end up cutting him after next season, regardless. But what I'm curious to see is just how he's going to be used in 2021, because that was one of Gettleman's first big signings as the Giants GM, and I didn't care for it from the start. It has not aged well. He did not play well before opting out last season, and right now he would either be the starting right tackle, or he would be in a rotation with Matt Parrott, who was up and down. Parrott was off to a decent start last year before he got COVID, and then what didn't look quite the same when he came back. But he's got hopefully a whole off season to recover, and hopefully he'll be better next year. But I feel like Solder could still be a good mentor to have for Parrott and Andrew Thomas, the two young tackles. But in terms of expecting him to go back to his peak form, I just think that's completely unrealistic. And the Giants will most likely move on from him after next season, one way or the other.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think these moves show that they're ready to compete, ready to take that next step in the NFC East. And I think the Giants could be one of these teams that steps it up next year. Obviously, we got to see what the draft does, but you think they're ready to go?
Well, they're definitely going all in this offseason. There's no question about that. And considering the nature of the Giants division, the Eagles have definitely taken a step backward for the time being. I still like Washington overall, but they still have a quarterback question to answer long term. Fitzpatrick could be a one-year stopgap. The Cowboys, I still think, have a ton of talent on offense, but are looking pretty terrible on defense. It's interesting. Right now the Giants all of a sudden, I'd say, have a really, really good secondary with the addition of Adoree Jackson. You got Bradbury, you have Jabril Peppers, Logan Ryan, Xavier McKinney at the safety spot. So there's a lot of depth there all of a sudden. But they might be able to compete, but there are definitely still some flaws on this roster. I'm curious to see how the Giants address those in the draft. Once we see that approach, I'll make a bigger statement. But I think it's possible that they could sneak into the playoffs, but obviously a lot's dependent on the division. But I did want to get your take on one thing here. In terms of the aggressive free agent approach, last time we saw the Giants do this was in the 2016 offseason when they brought in Janoris Jenkins, Damon Harrison, and Olivier Vernon on big contracts. They ended up making the playoffs that season, their only time since winning Super Bowl 46. And then it's been a slow descent into hell since then. Do you think we could see a similar effect?
I'm gonna be honest. I don't believe in Daniel Jones. I think he could be okay enough to where they can go 8-8, maybe 9-7 this season. But if they really want to figure this thing out, they have to get a long-term quarterback. I mean, maybe Jones surprises me. That could definitely happen, but he's got to beat someone other than Washington on a more consistent basis.
I think that's fair, but but one thing I do understand about getting Galladay and Rudolph is you are finally starting to surround him with weapons. And I'm not saying this is the same comparison at all, but Josh Allen had a significant improvement last year after getting Stephon Diggs, surrounding him with better playmakers. It absolutely could help Daniel Jones. To that extent, probably not. But if we see a step forward from him, I think the big key right now on offense is just that offensive line, which the Giants lost Kevin Zeitler from. I'm very confident they'll do something to try to address that in the draft in some fashion. I could see them going for an Elijah Vera Tucker or something early in the draft. But outside of that, the playmakers, depending on if they end up moving Evan Ingram, are pretty much set. And we'll see how Saquon Barkley comes back. But if everyone is healthy, the Giants at least have a pretty good complement of playmakers. And Galladay's addition could also help open things up for Darius Slayton on the other side of the field.
It could. And there's also another team in New York that surrounded their young quarterback with playmakers, and that's the New York Jets. Now, the moves they made that we're going to bring up today are more on the defensive side, and that's good news for first-year head coach Saleh. He's going to be there. Robert Saleh, however you say it, whatever. He's the head coach. He brings in LaMarcus Joyner. We talked about safety being a need. I wanted Malik Hooker. Joyner's not a bad addition. I think the secondary is looking good, and then they also brought in Sheldon Rankins.
Yeah, let's say hit those one at a time. We can start with LaMarcus Joyner, who was brought in on a one-year deal. He's had overall, I'd say, a solid career. He's a versatile corner slot guy who can play safety. It seems that the Jets are bringing him in to be a free safety next to Marcus May, who signed his tag while they work out a long-term deal. Joyner's big thing is just consistency and injury history and staying on the field. And I know we didn't hit on this, but that's a big thing for Galladay too, by the way.
Yeah.
But going back to the Jets, I do like the fit of Lamarcus Joyner as a veteran presence who has the versatility to play slot and the free safety role, and should be a good mentor to a mostly young Jets secondary. It's just a 1 year deal, so limited risk for the Jets.
Yeah, it is. I think I like it. I'm a big Lamarcus Joyner guy going back to the St. Louis Rams, Los Angeles Rams on Hard Knocks there. He was always someone that caught my eye. I liked him a lot. Sean McVay's relationship with him was solid. And I think he could really step up and make some plays on this defense because St. Louis was excited for him. He was even more excited to get Sheldon Rankins and someone that the media in New York's going to love a lot too because he's fiery.
He is, but I just focusing on football for a second. I absolutely love the Rankins pickup for the Jets. I really do. That first of all, considering how much attention is going to be paid at defensive tackle to Quinn and Williams, if Sheldon Rankins, who thrives as more of a pocket collapsing pass rushing defensive tackle, is left one on one, if he stays healthy, he could have a massive impact on the interior for the Jets, and that'll help both him and it'll help Carl Lawson and Jabari Zuniga on the edges. So I'm really curious to see if he's able to stay healthy. I love the fit. 2 year contract, 17 million, I believe. So not a super long term deal. Rankins was a former first rounder of the Saints, and he had a breakout season there. The only big concern I have for him is just that he landed on injured reserve the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, it was. He does so many things well too. I mean, you look at what he did with the Saints. That guy, he's just a tank, and you put him together with Quentin Williams. It kind of now don't go crazy on me here, but he reminds me of when Ndamukong Suh was paired with Aaron Donald in Los Angeles. Those two ferocious defensive tackles that are in there, and then believe it or not, you got some edge help on the outside with Carl Lawson, and I think they're probably going to draft a pass rusher as well.
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, I know I'm wondering how they're going to rotate that other defensive end spot with Zuniga, who they just took last year. But considering the Jets have the extra picks, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them go for somebody with their later first round pick or in the second or third round. It's not a super talented edge class at the top of the draft, but there is a pretty good amount of depth. And if the Jets take a flyer on one of the guys in the early rounds, I would not blame them at all. The defensive side, I think they're going to go heavy at the cornerback position because that was a very, very evident weakness last year. They had some of the shittiest corners, and also Greg Williams, who kind of ruined them. So, I mean, I think the corner class is decently deep, and the Jets will make at least one or two moves there because I think Joyner, like they're planning to use him at free safety next to May. We'll see if Ashton Davis is sprinkled in at all. But we're starting to see Salah's fingerprints on this defense. We're starting to see these guys fill the similar roles that he had with his defense in San Francisco. So I do want to ask you really quick, though. The Jets were this team that had all this cap space. And for the most part, like I wouldn't say they've been super aggressive. Like they've definitely made some big moves, but especially the Carl Lawson move, but they haven't broken the bank, I'd say, too much outside of that. Yeah, they went for Corey Davis rather than Galladay. Do you think that's a smart approach for a team that's looking to build through the draft, or do you think that hesitancy could come back to cost them?
I like it. I'll be honest. We see so many times teams overpay in free agency for big names and all these big teams. Yeah, the Giants being one of them, the Jaguars every year, it seems like. But you look at the Jets. I like this approach. You have a new head coach that knows what he wants. You bring in people and players that could absolutely fit what he wants to do and what he needs to do in order to achieve success. So if you bring in those veterans that some maybe he might be familiar with, or some that definitely play the role of those that he's had success with in the past, that can definitely help improve your team. And if you want to look in the draft, that's where you can build your culture, because you're not going to build a culture in free agency. No one's ever done that, but you can do it through a draft. And that's where you elevate this process. Because if you try to go through free agency, you're trying to make the playoffs right now. I don't think the Jets are right there, but they're signing enough guys, being smart, bringing in these lesser named guys, giving them opportunities. I think it makes a bunch of sense, and I love their offseason.
Yeah, I get it. I really do. I wouldn't fault the Jets for being aggressive to an extent, considering all their financial resources. And they have been. They've signed a couple of big names and guys that make sense. But ideally, you're going to build the foundation of your team through the draft and then supplement that with free agency. The Jets are not a 1 year rebuild. As much as I like what they've done for the most part, they could definitely take a step forward. But considering how good the Bills are, how bright the future of the Dolphins could be, and how the Patriots have been super aggressive in that division. Right. So, I mean, while they could definitely improve, the odds of them winning more than a few games next season, I'd say, are still slim, especially because they haven't figured out what they're going to do at quarterback yet. And there's still a big question there. But I definitely get it. I think it's really interesting to compare the two New York football teams' very different free agency approaches.
It was, and you mentioned the Patriots. Now, they might be telling me to hold my beer here when I say you can't build success through free agency. You can't build playoff like when you can't build sustained success through free agency. I think were the words that I said. And the Patriots have done that for years. I mean, they just bring in the guys at the right time on cheap deals, and then they find a way to make them good, or they just sign them off the street. So Patriots are definitely one of those teams that can and have the luxury to do something like that.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. Being a Giants fan, I hope it doesn't work.
Yeah, I hope so too. Anyways, let's get into hockey and talk about the New York Islanders because we haven't done so in a while, and we haven't really touched on them in a very long time. But you look at what they have accomplished here. Spit it out, Dylan. You look their win streak of 9 games. That was absolutely insane. Before we transition more into that, let's just talk about the 9 games themselves. What did you like about that win streak?
Oh man, I mean, as much as I hate to admit it, man, they deserve our attention. We didn't mean to ignore them as long as we have, but the Islanders are in first place in the best division in hockey right now, and they've only given up 73 goals in 33 games. I mean, that's just absurd. They're barely giving up 2 goals a game. Their defensive structure and their goaltending have been outstanding all season. And while during that 9 game winning streak, I think it's fair to point out that 7 of those 9 were against either Buffalo or the Devils. But I don't mean that as an insult to the Islanders. They still had to go out there and take care of business and win the games, and they did. And one thing that good teams do is you got to take care of the teams you should beat. The Islanders are miles ahead of especially Buffalo and to a lesser extent New Jersey. And they went out there and took care of business, grinding out these relatively low-scoring games, except for the Buffalo games where they're able to put up 5 because of what a dumpster fire the Sabres are right now. But I mean, they've lost 14 straight, man. They haven't won a game since the last time we talked about it. But anyway, I still like their attention to detail on defense. Their goaltending has been great. I mean, they're just playing a very physical, demanding style of hockey that's very difficult to play against, and it's been damn effective.
Yeah, and speaking of the Sabres, they should sign Scott Foster to be their goaltender. Maybe he can stop more pucks. But anyway, I love that win streak. I mean, whenever you get teams to buy in and just continue on the sustained success on multiple things. Look, this is something that when it gets to the playoff times, assuming the Islanders will make it, I assume they will. You look at what they have going for them. If you can look back, even not just right now into what has happened, but if you get down the stretch, you might lose a few games, lose that mojo in the locker room. Once the playoffs start, you look back. Look, fellas, we won 9 games in a row earlier this season. That's momentum. That's something that knows, like, look, we're legit. And they're a team that was in the Stanley Cup final last year. They're a team that plays very consistent hockey. I like how you talk about the structure. I mean, that's really solid what Trotz has done. Sorokin's looked very good in his rookie season. I don't think he gets enough praise. Everyone's talking about Lankinen. Well, he's really wet his pants. We'll get into that later. But Sorokin's look good. Varlamov's look good. And this team looks good.
Yeah, they do. I got to give them some credit. I mean, they're a very difficult team to play against because they just shut down the opposing offense better than I'd say any team in the league. The 73 goals against in 33 games is just absurd. I mean, not to harp on that too much, but that is the strength and identity of the New York Islanders, and they are playing to their strengths incredibly well. And really quick, I think this deserves its own special mention. During that winning streak in one of the games over Buffalo, can we talk about Matt Barzal's ridiculous goal for just a second? I know that happened a few weeks ago, but the one-on-one battle with Ristolainen, who had absolutely no fucking chance of knocking Barzal off the puck. Barzal not only took it from him, but then skated in front, went between his legs and just flicked it over the goalie's shoulder, bar down. One of the nastiest goals I've ever seen. Definitely the goal of the year so far this year. I just wanted to give that its own special mention.
Yeah, you sent me that when it happened about 2 weeks ago, and my jaw dropped. I was like, "You got to be kidding me! That's the goal of the year, no doubt about it." That was special. I don't think anyone can top that this season.
Oh man, I don't think so either. But I'd love to see some people try. Maybe we
Yeah,
see a Michigan goal or something. I mean, it'd make for some entertaining hockey, man. But I just wanted to give that a quick shout out. But as much as the Islanders have been great, I mean, even after that 9-game winning streak was dropped, they've won two straight at the time of this recording, still in first place. I do think we need to talk about one downside to how well they've been playing. That's the injury to Anders Lee.
yeah. Anders Lee, torn ACL. He's going to be done for the season. That's not good news. He's the block of this team. Like Barzell's nice. He's the captain. Everyone goes through him. But you look at Anders Lee. He's that guy on the outside. He's the left winger. He puts the puck in the back of the net. He's a consistent scoring piece on that team. And a team that doesn't have a lot of scoring, that's something Anders Lee brings. So it's gonna be hard to replace him. He's been out a few games now, but you look back at it, they still find a way to win. I think it speaks to how much Kiefer Bellows is going to have to step up now. Someone that we talked about before in a previous episode, not having a big role. He's got to step up now and start playing some hockey.
He does. With Lee being out, he's getting this major opportunity to step in and produce for a team that doesn't have a ton of offense. Yeah, they're definitely more of a defensive team. Lee, though, I mean, he is the captain. He is the leader of the Islanders. He's been around this team I think he's been on the team 8 seasons now. He's a really, really physical player who's got a good offensive top six forward productivity to him. He's just got that reputation. He's got the respect of the Islanders locker room, and he deserves it. And tied for the team lead in goals, I believe, at the time of his injury. I know that was about a week ago now at the time of recording, but he is not somebody that the Islanders can replace internally. They just can't. That nobody brings that same combination of offensive productivity and physicality. Everyone else either has one or the other. Islanders have plenty of physical guys in the bottom of their lineup, but none of them are capable of bringing his leadership and his offensive output to the team. So definitely not an easy guy to replace, but there is one silver lining to that injury, and that's that once they're able to put him on long-term injured reserve, the Islanders, who have been in salary cap hell all season, like we've talked about, are going to have the flexibility to make a move to try to replace him.
Yeah, they will. And there's a lot of spicy names that could be thrown around. And I like someone. I'm gonna say if we're looking at replacements for him, I think one name that really jumps off the table. He doesn't have the best year, but he reminds me a lot of what Anders Lee brings, and that's Taylor Hall in Buffalo. I'm sure he got that big contract 1 year. I don't know why the heck he picked Buffalo, but he did. And I think it's a good opportunity for the Islanders to bring him in and see what he's got.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely different styles of players, but we all know how good Taylor Hall can be when he's at the top of his game in terms of his offensive ability. But we also said that when he signed with the Sabres, and hasn't quite worked out. I hope enough hockey fans are listening to understand just how terrible they are. But there were a couple other names I wanted to throw out. Another one that's in the division this year, like Hall, is Kyle Palmieri on the Devils, who are also going to be selling. I think he's more of a similar style player to Lee, I'd say, in terms of he's a good offensive player, but he's a little bit more physical than Taylor Hall is, can replace that leadership aspect a little more. And another wild card name that I'd be really curious to see if they're interested in is Rickard Rakell from the Ducks.
Ooh.
I wanted to get your thoughts on which one of those guys do you think the Islanders are more likely to go for? Who do you think would fit better?
Raquel would be cheaper, wouldn't he?
I mean, considering the Ducks are also terrible, but Raquel's contract situation, the fact he hasn't been quite the same the last few years, it'd be tough. I don't think he would cost as much, but the Islanders, considering their lack of salary cap flexibility, I think Raquel would be a bigger risk.
Yeah, he would. I don't think you could take risks at this stage. I think maybe Dzingel could be a name. He's been thrown around a little bit. He went back to the Senators, I believe, last time I looked, but he's been thrown around like a bag of trash that hasn't been picked up in a while. So I don't know what the heck they're gonna do there, but there's a lot of names to be replaced.
Yeah, and I have no doubt that the Islanders are going to make a move now. They have the flexibility to do it. They're not going to formally put Lee on long-term injured reserve until they make that move. So trade deadline's April 12th, and I'm curious to see who they go after.
Yeah, and last thing on the Islanders, I picked up recently that Nick Leddy has been on fire in the point department. I mean, you look at him, he's always been just some defenseman that's pretty solid on the back end and doesn't really put up the point production. This guy's got 21 points. He's got 20 assists right now. Like he's finding guys wide open. He's looking like Magic Johnson out there dishing the puck around.
I mean, hopefully he doesn't have HIV, but I mean, he's played pretty well. The Islanders' defense as a whole has been really solid. That top pair of Pelech and Polak is still the key to their success, I'd say. But Letty's been better after a bit of a rough start because like him and Mayfield had some down moments at times. But overall, starting to get back on track, and I'm curious to see if that continues.
Yeah, and let's head over to the New York Rangers, Madison Square Gardens, where they play. It's got the Artemi Panarin is back. He's looked good, and I don't even know. Did we mention the 9-goal game?
We're going to. Like, I know I mentioned it at the very beginning of the free agency episode, just kind of as proof that we recorded it the morning of that time. But Panarin, welcome back. I missed you, buddy. The Rangers are not the same team without him. Yeah, they went 4-5 in his 9-game absence, which isn't terrible, but they're definitely a significantly better team when he's around, and he's played well since he's come back. Team loves him, just provides that energy. So I'm happy to have him. Rangers, now that he's back in the fold, outside of Igor Shesterkin, they're pretty healthy. So, I mean, this is the Rangers team we could expect to see, hopefully for the rest of the season and going from there. But Panarin's been good, and that 9-0 game, man, I think was a great punctuation mark. Mika Zibanejad has been getting better after a really, really slow start. He was improving before that game, but he had 6 points in the second period alone, tying an NHL record. I mean, he's been really good. And can we talk about that game winner he had against the Capitals the other night, where he just knocked Brendan Dillon off the puck, just stole the shit from him, and then went bar down? I mean, that was nasty with 2.5 to go. It's great to see him starting to play well again.
Yeah, and he could be an X factor. You look at this Rangers team, they're only 4 points out of a playoff spot. Let's be realistic here. And you get Panarin back, maybe there's still a potential run in this team. Look, they came in with high expectations. I've never been, I'll take that back. What I've seen out of Capo Caco makes me throw up. I don't like the guy at all. But anyway, you look at the rest of this team. I think they're really solid. They have some veterans, but they also have some young guys. You're shaking your head about Caco. Where am I wrong?
Well, first of all, he scored 2 goals tonight. And second of all,
tonight.
Like to me, like I've been watching every game. Like I get that second overall pick, he didn't burst onto the scene with a huge rookie season. I get that. But he has, to me, been significantly better this season. He's a lot more confident, a lot stronger on the puck. He's been great along the boards. He's generating chances. The finishing hasn't been there for the most part other than tonight's game. I'm not doubting that. But while he is imperfect, I still see a lot of upside there. He's absolutely taken a step forward. And considering the fact that he's 20 years old and that this offseason was not even close to normal with the lack of training camp and preseason, I'm not ready to give up on him yet at all. And he's the last couple of games, he's been playing on a kid line with Lafreniere and Hedl. And I'd like to see them get some more time, because I think that like if they develop some chemistry, that could be a really dangerous line going forward.
It could. It's sort of like the young line where you have the kids that could do it together for multiple years, and it's something like the Hawks had when they had a few years ago. I don't know why Colliton broke it up; he's out of his mind. But it was the money line of DeBrincat, Strome, and Kane. Those three. Strome played with DeBrincat back in I think it was junior, something like that. They played together. They already had chemistry. Strome, a good passer, sets up Kane well. That line was perfect. But of course, Colliton broke that up. But it's similar to that, where you have the young guys that are playing together a little bit. Now Kane was a little bit older. But my point is, getting the offensive point production out of those guys for multiple years could definitely help out the chemistry and the team as well.
Yeah, right now they're playing on the third line. I mean, I really liked Kakko when he was playing on the line with Panarin and Ryan Strome, and that's where he seemed to be at his best. I still like Lafreniere too. You see the flashes, but he overall hasn't had a very good rookie season either. I get that, or at least in terms of point production. I mean, you see the flashes of talent. So again, he's 19, and I'm not saying anything about him, but other than one decent stretch where he had 6 points in 4 games, he's been relatively quiet. And I'm hoping to see them get a little bit more ice time because overall, I still think the Rangers have a bright future. But considering their flaws and considering the fact that they play in the best division in hockey, the odds of them sneaking into the playoffs, I'd say, are still very, very low. And I'm not saying that means this season's a bust. I still think this is more of a building year. But I'd like to see those young guys get some more confidence and then go on build off that into next season when Brendan Smith's contract is off the books and the Rangers hopefully get Igor back healthy, because then they might be ready to take a step forward.
Yeah, and to your point about the playoffs, like a lot of these young kids outside of Lafreniere, they had the playoff experience last season in the expanded thing, and that's huge because it gets them the experience of, okay, you got to win today to move on. You could have a chance at the Stanley Cup, so they still get that experience. You'd like to see it at a more consistent clip to where they do it year after year, but just having some sort of experience, even if it's in a bubble where there's no fans or anything like that, it still gives them some sort of feeling of, hey, we got to go out there and play hockey.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, the only reason they got in with the unprecedented pandemic, the expanded playoffs, I get it. And they also got their teeth kicked in. I mean, really shitty for 3 straight games, right? So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but them knowing just how difficult the playoffs could be, it could definitely be beneficial down the road when hopefully the Rangers are able to take a step forward in the next season or two. But yeah, speaking of getting their shit kicked in, the Blackhawks haven't been quite as good recently, have they?
They have not. They have not. Let's get into the Blackhawks talk, should we? The Florida trip, they got swept. Didn't even come close in any of them. The Panthers, they went on the road there. Didn't happen. Doesn't matter. You go to Tampa Bay. Maybe we could do it. Nope. Not there either. Not there either. This Blackhawks team makes me continue to just they've I'll be honest, they're up and down. There's a couple points in the year where I get excited and believe in this team for some dumb reason, and then they always come back to, hey, the goaltending and the defense is going to go back to how it was. And you called it. You said that don't buy in. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. I said, come on, they're doing it every night. I was wrong. This team's
Well,
bad.
I mean, they're still in the playoff spot as of now, and we did kind of talk about how it was going to be a tough stretch of schedule coming up against the top teams in the division. So some regression was coming, regardless, right? I mean, you had to know that there was going to be a losing streak at some point during the season. But this has been a little bit more drastic than I expected. But I mean, finally, the team is starting to be more what we expected at the beginning of the year. So I don't look like a complete dipshit on here, you know. But the Blackhawks, I think 2-6-1 in their last 9 games overall. They got a huge 6-game homestand coming up, right? Because they're tied with Columbus at the time of this recording for the last playoff spot in their division. Realistically, I think the Blackhawks need to win at least 4 of those 6 games. I wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, they do. They have to find a way to string them together. And I know they're battling injuries. I know they haven't had a frontline center in weeks. I mean, they finally got Dylan Strome back after he was concussed for a month. So you lose Strome. I mean, that's Pius Suter, David Camp, Carl Soderberg, who was a heck of a pick. The signings from Stan Bowman. Let me go on a little thing here. Matthias Janmark's been insane. He's putting the puck in the back of the net every time I look up. You have Soderberg, who's a good net front presence on the power play. And there's a lot of good things there. Kurashev stepped up, made some plays, and I really like the future of this team. But going forward, they have to find a way to put things together, because there for a while, I thought Jeremy Colleton was an underrated head coach in the National Hockey League. I thought he was, whatever he did to the defense, like it's the same roster essentially to last year on the defensive side, but everything's changed and you have worse goalies and a worse defense. So explain that logic. I don't know what went into that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some inconsistency there, but and obviously the goaltending not being quite as strong in recent weeks has not reflected well on the defense. So I mean, those do kind of go hand in hand there. The spotlight on Adam Boquist is really, really bright right now because he's like the Blackhawks' only homegrown top 10 pick on the defensive side the last few years, right? So, I mean, before he came in, the Blackhawks had a successful run where they were trading picks to try to, trying to stay in that contending window. So the spotlight on him is really, really bright. We got that, the Blackhawks have that huge homestand coming up where if they want to turn the momentum around, they have to win more than 3 of the games. I think they have to have a winning record on that homestand. And you mentioned Matthias Janmark. I wanted to ask you, do you think the Islanders would be interested in him?
I don't think the Hawks trade him. I'll be honest. I think they're trying to make a run here. They got some cap space up in the air now with Brent Seabrook's unfortunate retirement, puts him on long-term IR or whatever. Any way that gets out of that money, at least for a little bit. So I think that could potentially make the Hawks contenders if they wanted to.
I mean, contending this year, I mean, they could still make the playoffs. I don't see them as a threat to win the Stanley Cup, though, or anything yet this year. As talented as they are offensively, with DeBrincat having a renaissance year and Patrick Kane being ridiculous as always. But there are still the questions on the defensive end and goaltending. And them playing some better teams, I think, have exposed some of their flaws a little bit. So they are really going to need to buckle down if they're going to hold on to that playoff spot. Because that division, while it's not as strong as the Rangers and Islanders division, still has a couple of very solid teams in it that don't get enough credit.
Yeah, Dallas is always there. Carolina plays well. Columbus, I looked at Laine's stats the other day. That guy, I don't know what's going on with him. He randomly throughout his career just dips. And then he just comes back to being an elite goal scorer that looks like he's the best player on the ice. I mean, he's the most strange hockey player I've ever watched.
Yeah, he's something else, man. We could go on a whole other tangent about Tortorella and what he does to Columbus hockey players, but I think we could save that for a bigger hockey episode down the line. We want to preview what we're doing next week here, getting into the baseball season.
Yeah, last thing real quick on the Blackhawks. Kevin Lankinen, Subban have both sort of came back to life a little bit. And it seems like we talk about them potentially fizzling out, but I could see it. But you look at it, they're competing in these games at least for a period or two periods, and then they just collapse. So they got to find a way to what's the word? They got to find a way to compete for the entire game, play the full 60 minutes. Eddie Olczyk always talks about that on the telecast with Pat Foley. Always all you young hockey players and all his little stuff he talks about. But anyway, that's something that they got to do. The goaltending, like you mentioned, there's probably going to come down, and it has, but that's expected.
Yeah, I mean, playing all 60 minutes and finishing off close games, that's the next step for young, talented teams to take. Blackhawks and Rangers, I think, both fall into that category. Once they start to finish off games like that, you're going to see a drastic change in their record.
Yep, that's fair. Anyway, let's preview what we're doing next week, and that is we're doing a baseball MLB preview. We're going to be talking about the Cubs, White Sox, Mets, and Yankees, and we're going to dive into it, talk about everything that's taken place and what we look forward to in the season, maybe some bold predictions. I remember last year we had some fun doing that before the shortened season. We're doing it for the whole full 162 here, so it should be a lot of fun predicting not every single game, but you know what I mean. Talk about the records and basically our predictions going into the season. But I'm excited for it. Are you?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I'm hoping we'll have at least a guest or two on here to get a little outside input, because we might be slightly biased towards our own teams here. But I'm definitely excited to talk about it. We'll see what happens with all four of those teams, because they all have very intriguing storylines to address. I'm excited to record that one and go from there.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I can't wait. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure that you click subscribe on all the platforms or follow, whatever it is. We're on Apple Podcasts. Leave a review there. Click the 5 stars if you feel that we suffice those needs today. Head over to Spotify. Click subscribe or follow, whatever it says over there. And head over to YouTube if you want to see our pretty little faces that match our voice. There they are. Anyway, that's going to do it for today. So I appreciate you. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We will see you next time.